Building Transparency was launched in 2020 to become the home of the Embodied Carbon and Construction Calculator, or EC3. EC3 is a tool that allows anyone in the construction sector to aggregate all of the information around the materials that they're purchasing and putting into their buildings and make carbon smart decisions by taking the embodied carbon emissions of each of those products as a decision-making point in their procurement process. So many times when you're talking about carbon emissions of construction, people tend to think about the operational energy consumed by the buildings once they're built. But in fact, almost 12% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the emissions of making all of the materials that we put into our buildings. So if you think about making cement and concrete or steel or glass, all of the emissions that go into the manufacturing process, whether it's energy or process emissions for making cement, all of that equates for over 10% of global emissions. And it's emissions that once you spend them, you can't take them back. So we have to address them urgently. And to do that, we need the data that is necessary to account for them. So Building Transparency's mission is to make sure that the data needed when it comes to embodied carbon emissions of construction materials is available to everyone. The best-in-class data to do this work is called an Environmental Product Declaration, or EPD. There's a lot of three-letter acronyms in this work. But an EPD is a third-party verified declaration of a product's environmental impacts, including the carbon emissions that it took to make the material. So what Building Transparency does is we aggregate all of that EPD data into a digital database that allows anyone to access that data through APIs into any other platform or tool. We also provide a free tool called EC3 that allows anyone in the industry to register for free, log in, and find and compare materials based on their carbon emissions. So our tool and data at Building Transparency, whether it's EC3 or Tally, which is a whole building lifecycle assessment tool, enables anyone in the sector to actually access this data and act on it. That includes policymakers. So policymakers at the local, state, and federal levels in the United States have leveraged our data to inform policies, including the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, with over $6 billion in low carbon procurement funds for construction materials. That means that the data helped them understand what manufacturers had EPDs, which ones needed them, provide a grant program of over $100 million to help manufacturers actually invest in providing environmental product declarations to our database and others, and then actually set thresholds and labels to let anyone be able to understand what a low carbon product is when it comes to construction materials. So embodied carbon emissions and the data necessary to track it for construction products is something that started in the private sector with companies like Microsoft and Skanska making commitments to require EPDs of their manufacturers during procurement. That means that a manufacturer that didn't have an EPD couldn't compete and actually be on the selected list for a contractor like Skanska or an owner like Microsoft. That's spread now to multiple owners, architects, engineers, and contractors that know that they can make that requirement a part of their procurement process or their specifications, and it's spreading also to policy. So the federal Buy Clean policy in the US requires Type 3 EPDs for concrete, steel, glass, and asphalt currently, and again provides investment with a grant program to help manufacturers that don't have that data be able to actually be on those procurement lists from the federal government. One of the things that I love about what environmental product declarations do is they provide the data for those that want to procure materials and make decisions based on cost and the carbon emission impacts of their products. But it also helps manufacturers actually understand the emissions of what they're making. So a manufacturer that goes through the process of making an environmental product declaration will understand the highest impact ingredients in their products and be able to optimize those and actually lower the carbon of what they're making and provide a lower carbon product to the market. So there's a kind of a duplicate benefit for the procurers of the material, but also the makers of them through this environmental product declaration process. One of the things that I love about where we sit at Building Transparency is being an agnostic place for this data to live and make it accessible to everyone. But there really is an ecosystem of tools, solutions, platforms, and companies that have to be engaged and involved to make this work and deliver what we need for the AEC community to be able to act. So we always like to say that we provide a tool and a database. Any other tool can use our data. And there's a whole suite of tools that hopefully you'll learn about that can actually make this data accessible to you where you sit, whether you're an architect, an engineer, a contractor, or an owner.